With Yourself.Podcast, and we hope that this podcast today finds you doing well and having a good, healthy day mentally and physically. Our guest today is Deanna, and her background is in anger management research. She's done a lot of research with that, and she's going to talk about a little bit about how to handle anger management on an individual level. I know a lot of us may feel that emotion many times throughout the day or very seldom throughout the day, depending on how happy your life is, I guess. And so thank you, Deanna, so much for joining us today and giving us your time and your preparation for this podcast. I greatly appreciate it. I'm sure our listeners do too.
My pleasure.
So I guess I'll just dive kind of right into the discussion. I'm really excited to learn about this because I know a lot of our listeners battle with this emotion, and some of the times they don't know where it's coming from. Some of the times they do, but they don't know what to do to change it, and it becomes part of their personality at times. So, in your opinion, where or what do you think that anger is trying to tell the individual?
Well, at the basic level, when we feel an emotion, it's information about a change in our environment. So when we feel anger, that means we've noticed something, or we've thought of something, or something has changed in our constant state that has made us upset about something. And typically, when we get angry, it's because we see a change, we see something that in our mind violates a social norm or in some way thwarts our own goals. So if somebody cuts you off in traffic, you get angry because you didn't want to have to slam on your brakes, or
Right.
if you see someone throwing litter on the ground, that makes you angry because we're not litter bugs. We're not supposed to throw litter on the ground. Let's be respectful of our neighbors and our city. So anger, just like any emotion, usually results from some sort of change in our environment, and it's really just information for us. It's information about what's happening in our surroundings or in our minds, because sometimes we make ourselves angry because we thought about something that happened to us, and that brings up anger because we're processing that change in our environment again and again and again.
So it could be
So
related.
really, yeah, go ahead.
It could be related to past trauma then, if it's a constant thing.
Well, now we probably want to make a distinction right up front
Okay.
about two types of anger. There's trait anger and there's state anger. State anger is what we kind of experience on a daily basis, but it's something, that a change in our environment that makes us upset. So someone has violated a social norm, someone has done something inappropriate, made us late,
Mm.
told us something that wasn't true, yelled at us, some sort of change in our environment, and we react to that. Um, and that is just kind of living in a social environment. So we have this tendency to react to these changes in environment, and especially with regard to anger, because anger implies someone else is responsible in some way. So someone has done something unfavorable toward us, okay,
Okay.
or our goals, or towards society, okay.
Okay.
In contrast, trait anger is more of a personality trait. So it's you being constantly vigilant, hyper vigilant, we would call it hyper vigilant, or constantly anxious, nervous, frustrated, upset, easily provoked, or even self-blaming constantly. This notion of hypervigilance. So there's a lot of clinical psychology and psychiatry that's devoted to trait anger, because this can be very destructive, very, very destructive to relationships, to a person's emotional and mental and physical health,
Mm-hmm.
and all those who interact with them. So that is more of a long-term treatment that probably requires some sort of clinical intervention
Okay.
to try to get at the root of that constant uh, nervousness and anxiety and frustration and anger. Um, Often people with PTSD deal with this. Often reflects the childhood trauma, childhood abuse. These are not uncommon. Could also have been the result of a car accident, some sort of damage to the brain, especially the amygdala, where all that fight versus flight starts.
Yes.
So, so we have two different types of anger. Most of us, unless we're under a clinician's care, unless we're working with a psychiatrist or a psychologist, probably experience some sort of state anger every day, just because we're not hermits and
Right.
people get in our way,
Yeah.
and that's irritating. A mild form of anger, maybe.
Right.
So we do have these two types of anger. My specialty is more in the state anger, but I certainly can address to a certain degree trait anger as well.
Okay. So with trait anger, there could be, like you mentioned, a lot of things underneath that. I understand that. I do understand now that you've explained trait towards or traits versus. I'm sorry, what was the other term you?
State,
State. Okay.
state versus trait. Yeah,
State
it's just a
versus trait.
state of being versus a trait in your personality. Yeah.
Okay. So if it's part of the personality, could it be? So if it's part of the personality, I understood it as anger being as a secondary emotion to being hurt, like if it's a trait anger. So, like you said, it could be part of PTSD. So, it could be kind of a layer under fear, hurt, shame,
Mm-hmm.
those sort of things. Is that kind of? Am I understanding that
Yeah.
correctly? Okay.
Yeah,
So,
a very famous emotion psychologist, Paul Ekman, would say anger is one of the seven primary emotions. So, anger is a primary emotion, but it can also be a secondary emotion and a layer on top of, or some would say the tip of the iceberg.
oh,
Okay, so
okay.
that anger may be an overlay on deep seated fear, sadness, self-loathing, and again, these are often unresolved childhood traumas
Mm-hmm.
of some form or the other, abuse or misconduct, neglect, or something that just hurt us in such a unique way at an impressionable age that we have not been able to process it correctly and
Right.
deal with it. So much of trying to understand it as a secondary emotion, more as a hint there's something deeper
Right.
that's causing you to be angry all the time. It's just one of those bits of information about us and about our background and about our boundaries and about our experiences that we really should try to understand. The more we understand about what's making us angry, the more we understand where our boundaries are, because anger is kind of a boundary spanning emotion. So when someone has crossed a line, in fact, I even use this term in my model, the dual threshold model, of crossing the line. When we feel that someone has crossed the line with us, they have penetrated our boundaries, they have gone beyond what we feel is comfortable around us in our own bubble, in our own sense of safety, our own sense of space. That often will make us angry. But as a child or as someone in a life or death situation, that could be fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
But overall, when you look back, that might make you angry. How did I get myself in that situation? Or how could they have done that to me? Or these sorts of things. So that overlay of anger on top of these initial feelings of emotions that you had, these initial feelings or emotions you had with the initial event, can be hiding a lot of pain and regret or guilt underneath. But anger is definitely a unique type of information that helps in a weird way if you can express it in a manner that allows for conversation,
Mm-hmm.
can really help others learn your boundaries, learn what is painful to you, what has crossed the line on the part of their behavior, so that we can have a more positive relationship with each other. We don't know what's going on inside each other unless we
Right.
tell each other. And so emotions, or expressing emotions, are a way of letting other people know when they have somehow violated our boundaries or somehow done something to us that has significantly affected us in a positive way or a negative way. So a healthy way to think about emotion in general is their information. When you feel something, that's information. And so if you have the tools, you can then start thinking about, okay, what does this mean? Why am I getting angry? Am I just
Mm-hmm.
being petty? Is it my pride?
That's
Or is this
yeah.
something really serious that has to be addressed because this can't happen again?
Right. Right. So in knowing um, that there are layers, and seeing that once you've kind of, like you said, you've crossed that boundary, because really you don't know if you're angry with your partner, or if you're angry with your job, or like you said, somebody passing by, but it's a constant thing. What would be the difference between anger and aggression at that point, then, if it's part of your trait that you're constantly just on edge all the time?
Yeah, that is a really important distinction, and I appreciate that question. Unfortunately, a lot of people mix up anger and aggression. They treat them as if they're synonymous, that they're the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, while 90% of aggression does start with anger, only about 10% of anger ever becomes aggressive. So think about the number of times you get angry in a day with your spouse, with your kids, with your boss, with the neighbor dog, whatever. And even if you express anger, are you really trying to hurt them, or are you trying to tell them that they have hurt you in some
Oh,
way
yeah.
and you want to let them know about it? Um, it's important to distinguish from anger from aggression. Unlike anger being information about this change in your environment and the signing of wrongdoing to another person, aggression is the is fueled with the intention to harm the other. So the primary purpose of any behavior is tied to the intent to harm another. So aggression is behavior with the intention to harm, and anger is really more likely a feeling in response to being harmed.
Right. So you can
So
work.
it's very distinct.
So when you're describing the difference between anger and aggression, in aggression, people may say things that they don't mean to reverse the effect that they've had because they were offended or they were hurt. So in order to
Mhm,
lash
mhm.
back, they would use the aggression part. Is that
Right.
is that
So, I mean, they're you can call them cousins. All right. They're
okay?
just not the same. They're definitely related, but there is a lot of aggressive action that is very cold and calculated. And
Okay.
the
Okay.
anger could have long ago gone away.
I
At the
see.
same time, there's a lot of anger that may seem like they're trying to harm you, but in fact they're really expressing hurt because you were
Mm-hmm.
harming them.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I think it's worthwhile to make a distinction for some people. Some people would think of anger as hostility and aggression, but research kind of shows it's more uh, a feeling of pain and suffering.
Mm. Okay.
So imagine seeing someone who looks angry on the curb, and you think them as aggressive and hostile. What are you going to do to that person?
Yeah.
You're
Try to
gonna get away
avoid.
from that person as
Yes.
fast as you can. In contrast, imagine if you see this person is angry on the curb and you think of them as having pain and they're suffering.
Mm.
You'd have a completely different type of inclination toward that person. So um, again, aggression is definitely behavior with the intent to harm. Anger does not set out necessarily to harm the other person, but to redress the harm done to you. So it is what we would say a forward moving emotion, causing you to have a motivation to try and correct the problem. So someone cuts you off, so you honk the horn at them saying, don't do that. That's not appropriate in society, right?
Right.
So the intent is not necessarily to harm them. Boy, I sure hope they get in a car accident, but is to say, hey, what you did was wrong. You shouldn't do that again.
Right.
So
So
anyway, anger
okay.
and aggression, they're cousins, but they're not the same. And when anger can, of course, escalate. And that's what we try and do with anger management. You try to prevent that information and how you're feeling and reacting physiologically and emotionally from turning into aggression, trying to harm another person.
So we've talked about how anger is could be tied to past trauma or unmet needs. Like, could you tell me, like, if anger is a trait where a person is on the surface constantly angry, or has passed that anger issue and has become into an aggression issue, um, what kind of unmet needs has that person? What I'm trying to say is, like, um, when a person has those unmet needs, what could those unmet needs be that have gone to the point where, yep, no longer angry, now in an aggression stage. So anything that happens, I may blow up, I may do things to hurt others or myself. You know, could you give us some kind
Okay.
of insight on that?
So when I give a presentation or I do any sort of training on this topic, I differentiate between when we feel anger and when others express anger to us. So when another person expresses anger to us, that I always tell that student or that individual, um, respond with interest and concern, because very often people get angry when they feel like no one is listening,
Mm-hmm.
no one is paying attention, no one is helping them when they need help or needed help. So we want to always respond with interest. Tell me what is going on. This is I can tell this is really important to you. I can tell you're really upset. Tell me what's going on. And concern or empathy, I really care about you. I want to try to understand better why you feel this way. So first thing you do, respond with interest and concern. What do you think is our normal way to respond when someone gets mad at
What do I think? Um,
us?
I feel guilt. I feel personally. I feel, what did I do? What did I do to
Okay.
get them upset? And then avoidance. I avoid the person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's not atypical. That is flight, right?
Yes. Yes.
Fawn or appeasement.
Yes.
But other types of responses in the fight versus flight, when we see someone angry, is to fight. So the most common response to anger is anger back, and
Mm.
that's fight. Okay, you're coming at me, I'm coming at you.
Mm.
Versus, flight, which is like, I'm getting away. The fawning is, oh no, I'm trying to, hey, everything's okay. No, you misunderstand me. That's the fawning, right?
Or the peacemaking, trying to